close to you so you can play. And then bring it down.
Actually, it's fine. I should know it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Cats, Chats and 88 Keys. My name's JP.
My name's Henry.
And we are here to play you some Beethoven. This is the start of a really exciting kind of new chapter for us, where we are endeavouring to record all of the 10 Beethoven violin sonatas between now and the end of July. Fair to say it's been a long-running ambition. It probably constitutes the most important contribution by any one composer to the violin and piano repertoire. And as we've been sort of slowly accruing violin sonatas since we were teenagers, it does feel like a very momentous thing to now try and lay them all down. And where better place to give them a little dry run than for you here. And we're starting today with the Spring Sonata, I think arguably his best known, certainly maybe the best known beginning of any of his sonatas, and a piece that is so at peace and rich with geniality and acceptance and cheer, which is not always what we associate with Beethoven. He by this time already, we're sort of 1800, 1801, by this time already in the late 1790s, he was reporting his deteriorating deafness. And we have this cliche of Beethoven, this very strong, almost arrogant man railing against the frustrations he felt with his body and his condition. But there's so much warmth, there's so much humanity in his music, and it wouldn't really be any other way. I mean, that's the way that music becomes so universal and becomes able to speak to so many people. We welcome you to our house in southwest London. We've got a bewilderingly wide collection of humans here. Housemates, before you get any ideas. And I don't think the house has been full since maybe mid-December. So this feels very marvellous. Katie was going to say something.
Just earlier.
Really? Isn't that when Anna left? Anyway, yeah. And it feels incredible. Feels like a kind of a fresh start. So, Gabby's here, obviously, marshalling the Zoom and page turning for me in a bit. Thank you very much. Maestro Bobby Kay has hot-footed it back from Chiswick just in time to work his magic on the keys. How are you doing, Bobby?
Very well, thanks.
Excellent. It's good to see you. Katie's here, erstwhile attender of such concerts, with her booze in hand, as I would expect. And we're very excited because the two newest additions to our house are also here. Kirsty and Zoe are sitting in, and what a treat that is. So thanks, guys. This feels very convivial, very community-based, and I don't know, I speak for myself, but I know I speak for several other people in the room when I say that there's been a lot of high drama and high-octane emotion kicking around our lives the last few weeks. And I can't think of better music to put some balm on those troubled souls than Beethoven's Spring Sonata. You heard the beginning there. It's quite unusual for a piece of 4 movements and not insignificant in scope, about half an hour in length. It's quite unusual for such a piece to open with such ease, such little ego, such little desire to assert itself. Normally a piece of music like this would have a very strong opening theme, and it would lay down some very core fundamental motivic principles. But here it just feels like we've just opened a door and just got a glimpse into a world where this music has been going on since the beginning of time, and it's verdant and it's lush and it's fresh. And another thing that I think is quite unusual is that the violin starts. So I mean, these are still called piano and violin sonatas. It was not long after Beethoven there was to be a pivot, and composers were going to start calling them violin and piano sonatas, sort of asserting the dominance of the more soloistic instrument. But at the time, the piano was king, and it had been traditional for these to basically be piano sonatas with sort of violin obbligato, and in lots of Mozart sonatas that's exactly what you feel is going on. But Beethoven was, like he did with almost everything he wrote in every genre, he was turning the key and redefining the genre and laying down foundations for composers to develop it further for the next few hundred years. So I think it's marvellous the way there's no introduction. You know, normally you might expect the piano to lay down something and then for the violin to come in, but nothing. We just breathe, and then we're presented with this unbelievable melody that starts high and then falls. And harmonically, we would expect a piece at the beginning in this era to just cover two simple harmonies, the main key and then probably the dominant, and then come back again. So when in the third bar, and we can just play to the third bar, the music suddenly takes this slightly wistful, veiled tone. It goes to a minor chord, totally unexpected. And one other thing about this main theme, because I think it is so remarkable, is that at this time it was still very common for symmetry to be king. So a theme would normally last for 4 bars, and it would start at a certain range, a certain pitch, and after about 2 bars it would be at its high point, and then it would fall back away. So it would have a symmetrical shape to it, like something of architectural basis. But again, that's not what happens here. What we have instead is a line that is basically one giant sigh, falling from the height that it starts and coming to rest in this beautifully wide-eyed, almost sorrowful G minor. No, from the beginning. Yeah. And then we have 2 attempts to climb out of this. First of all, we have a question. And then he uses that question to take us where we want to go and bring us back home to the main key. And then the piano, not to be left out, takes over the theme and has its own fun with it, with a little bit of ornamentation and embellishment that's so suited to the piano. And I think that's a real feature of this work, is how the instruments dovetail each other constantly. More on that in a second. Humour and shock are not necessarily 2 things we would associate with Beethoven. Shock, very much so. He was the one who was going to pioneer such things as the crescendo to piano, where you would get louder and louder and louder and then suddenly pull the rug out from under the audience by going suddenly very quiet. You will hear that in numerous examples in this work. But in this work, there is shock through humour. It's not confrontational in your face. And so at the end of the first section, we've reached a very normal place harmonically. There's been lots of frivolity and joy, and then the piano launches in with a completely disconnected note and launches into a completely disconnected scale, and suddenly the music starts to take us where we really weren't expecting. Maybe we could play from like the last 4 bars, like 22. Where this starts, that's the second main theme of the first movement. And the bit that was just before, where the music kind of took all these side roads we weren't expecting, that's what we call a bridge section. It's where the composer literally is bridging from the main theme to the second theme. And let's say pre-Mozart maybe, these bridge sections were fairly rudimentary. You know, they had a simple purpose of getting from A to B harmonically in as short a time as possible. What composers soon began to realise is that the drama of music is found in the bridge sections. It's not found where you have a melody and you know where you are and everyone's having a nice time. It's while you're wrenching and evolving and moving from one melody to another. And Beethoven, as you just heard, plays this game better than anyone else. The second theme has a kind of a rustic folk element to it. You've heard these chugging chords that rise up in the piano, and the violin is playing these kind of quite carefree, ornamental motifs. The music is super simple harmonically and has a real kind of sense of abandon. But of course, it's Beethoven. So where would the fun be if we continued for too long knowing where we are? So with no warning, he suddenly takes us into the minor. He sets up this very eerie counter melody at the bottom of the piano. And on top, we're having more fun and games in canon, which is where one instrument plays a tune, and then I play it afterwards, and then he plays it again, and so we have this lovely kind of conversation. So taken all together, suddenly we're thrown into this dynamic. Just heard one of those famous crescendos to piano. So we think we're going somewhere very dramatic, and then he says, no, just joking. And then we go around again, the piano takes the main theme, and you're commenting. And those are the two main motifs that stretch most of the first movement. In the central section of the first movement, he takes the second one of those themes and uses it to, I think, for us to show off a little bit. And write some quite virtuosic writing where we're basically taking in turns to try and outdo each other. Should we go from the minor, a B flat minor? Great fun, and very different from the incredibly serene music that started the movement. Composers like Beethoven were always looking to. They knew where the bits of a piece of music were, where they could shock people and impress people. I've already alluded to the bridge section, and what we call the recapitulation is when the composer returns to the opening material after this central journeying among lots of different keys. And I think this transition back to the recapitulation is on a par with pretty much any that I've ever heard. He sets up this incredible oscillation between two notes. We seem completely lost, and then suddenly it fades away and this Elysian tune comes back to us. Should we go from the A pedal? And I get a tune first for a change, which is nice. Good, and then I guess the last thing I would maybe say is just some of the fun and games that go on in the coda. Coda literally means tail, and so it's the section at the very end of a movement where a composer he said all he needs to say. We're back. We've done all the material. We're in the home key. He could just end it, but it's just a way of being like, no. We're actually done, and it kind of ties everything together. Again, people with the genius of Beethoven took this to the next level and weren't content to just do something so mundane. The coda was an opportunity for lots more fun and games. Maybe from the D major. At this point, we could be going absolutely anywhere. around as if like, ooh, we're kind of lost, we don't know where we are, and then suddenly, here we are, and we roar on to the close. It's just magic. Now the second movement, I think it would be up there with my favourite things ever. After a first movement that is fairly serene, but it kind of, I should say, of course, I mean the reason it's called Spring Sonata is actually nothing to do with Beethoven particularly, but it just kind of stuck at the time. People were struck by how there was this kind of freshness, pastoral vibe right from the beginning, and so it stuck. And Beethoven didn't reject it, as was his wont for much of the names that people gave to his pieces. So if the first movement has this kind of slightly wandering, genial, in love with nature theme, Beethoven was obsessed with nature. He very much viewed it as sort of the manifestation of the proof of the existence of God. And so he had a very intense spiritual connection with it, and I think it comes across in the music. The second movement is complete calm. Even if you just listen to the way he sets up the left-hand accompaniment at the beginning, the harmony doesn't change, the range doesn't change, and we're just sitting there in pure bliss. And then over that so simple basis, he then spins a melody that is basically an embellishment of Three Blind Mice. All of that I've just played, we had two different chords. That's how settled and stable the music is. Then the violin takes the tune. There's some incredible interplay. I don't want to preempt too much of this movement because I feel like it should be heard kind of fresh. I mean, there are a couple of unbelievable moments that I would just like to prepare you for. I think it's a weird thing about music. There's one thing being shocked by a piece you've never heard before, but somehow when you know where the shocks are coming, they're more special because you can slightly brace yourself for them and you can slightly more feel the wonder as they hit you. And there's a couple of moments here where the music is unfolding so effortlessly and peacefully in the major, and then with no warning at all, a cloud comes across the sun and the whole complexion is changed. Maybe we'll go quick from 36. And then another surprise. Time we're nowhere near where we started, nowhere near B flat major, and then he does it again. We settle in G flats, and another G flat at the end of that. The third movement, I think, is one of the shortest movements in any repertoire ever. I'm pretty sure it runs at about 45 seconds, something like that. It's kind of blink and you miss it. And its kind of whole point, or at least, so it's a scherzo movement. Scherzo literally means joke, and this was always, at this time, the third in a four-movement piece, and it was a chance for some light relief. And then they would contrast the scherzo with what we call a trio, which was a slightly slower, more contrasting section. So we've got scherzo, trio, and he repeats the scherzo. The scherzo is basically a game where sort of Henry's not quite with the programme. And so he's playing the same thing as me, but he can't quite keep up. And so while I'm finishing my phrase, he's tagging on with the 2 notes I've just played, but a beat late. And then in the trio section is just a little game of chase. We're just chasing each other up and down with these wonderful staccato scales. It's a fantastic kind of palate cleanser after the cerebral pathos of the second movement. And then the last movement is really a very genteel affair. It's almost a doff to a sort of Mozartian movement, albeit with a few elements of slightly more devilishness thrown in. So for example, the opening melody, played as I'm about to play it, could easily be something out of Mozart. With Beethoven, he can't resist just being a little bit more indecent than that. So if you listen to the tenor line in the left hand, you hear this kind of slightly flirtatious counter melody that's just subverting the veneer of gentility. So this is called a Rondo movement. So this is where you have one main theme, that comes several times, and in between it we have these things called episodes, which is basically just a bit of contrasting music. But Rondo literally meaning around, so the main theme comes back time and time again, kind of tying the whole piece together. The first contrasting theme is rather a po-faced one. Sorts of fun and games with these ornaments and these accents from the piano coming on weaker beats of the bar. You know, all music's arranged into bars. There's normally 2, 3 or 4 beats in it, and depending on the number of beats, depends on this kind of hierarchy, an understood hierarchy between the beats. We're in 4 beats in a bar here, so you expect 1 and 3 to have the strength. And so what does Beethoven do? He puts these whopping great accents on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Which does a lot to destabilise things, exactly as you would have wished. The main central episode in this movement is again one of the things that I was referring to make this very much Beethovenian and not something more classical. With no warning at all, we get launched into this kind of Sturm und Drang, storm and stress writing. One of us having this very militant octave melody, and the other these furious dashing triplets. That leads back into a false recap where he takes us to the main theme in the wrong key and then wends his way back, which I think is really cool. What's also really nice is that he takes us back to the theme with a direct allusion to the way we transitioned back to the main theme in the first movement, which you'll remember. So here we have something very similar. So he now has a problem. And so instead of proceeding as we would think, he keeps going higher and higher and higher, shifting and sliding the harmonies until we eventually arrive in the right key, but we're all the way up here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, from the D, yeah? Something you'll hear if you listen out for it is that almost every time the theme comes, he writes slightly different things in, because why not? Variety is the spice of life. So those really cool pizzicatos that Henry was chucking in there, and this syncopation in the piano. I think that's pretty much it. The last iteration of the main theme is so cool. It's so nicely written. Something that was so four-square and on the beat before. We knew exactly where we were rhythmically here. It was really regular and stable. When it comes back for the last time, there's no main beats in the tune, and instead the right hand is just skipping on all the weaker beats of the bar in triplets. 1, 8, 9? Mm-hmm. Yeah? You don't have much.
Got it.
At which point we have a helter-skelter coda, full of fun and games. All the different material from the movement is tied together, and we race along to the finish. I think it's well and truly one of the most unfettered of all works by Beethoven I've ever played, and a reminder of just what a beautiful soul there was in there, that it wasn't all pain. And you know, if you want to get emotional about it, you could easily argue that the reason why he felt so much pain very shortly in his life was because this was his starting point. You know, pain is always much more hard to deal with when you've tasted the good stuff. So in many ways it's a sort of bittersweet piece, because we know how short-lived his dalliance in these realms was to be. But there's nothing wrong with a bit of bittersweet. And it's a lovely piece. I very much hope you enjoy it. Oh, you can buy tickets if you want. You know, this is not how we'd normally be choosing to give concerts, if I'm honest. Not that it isn't lovely. Basically haven't really had anything approaching regular concerts since, we've now ticked over a year since the last concert I gave before lockdown was with you. March 16th. Correct, yeah. So, and one thing's sure, even when things do start coming back, they're not going to start coming back all at once. It'll be dribs and drabs. So, if you're enjoying this and you want to kick in something, there's a link underneath. It can be however much you want. And actually, there'll be a very direct use for your money, because you know we're undertaking this enormous recording project. It's going to be about 15 recording days. We're fundraising for it, and any money you give will go straight to that, which will be wonderful, making our dreams come true. Good. Let's do it. Bobby K, you ready?
Well, is the music staying there, or is it going to go back?
I mean, you're the boss, mate. I think you should demand to have it where you would like. Do you want the stand?
Probably come back inside it.
Ah, just as he's moved the camera. Excellent.
How's that?
I mean, either better if it was where it was, or even more back.
Even more back. Even more back's good. Come in.
You can. are. Thanks, mate.
Well
That was
played.
wicked.
That's
You
great.
too, man. That was so much fun. So there we are, the first of 10 in absolutely no logical order whatsoever, except that that's the order we wanted to record them. So next Friday, tune in and you'll get the one that comes after that, number 6. I'm going to sound like a broken record because they're all incredible, but number 6 is genuinely one of my very favourites. It's not, I think, anywhere near as famous as The Spring, and I don't think it would be considered one of the box office of his sonatas, but it's so inventive, it's so ingenious, and I can't wait to explore it with you guys next week. So thanks very much for tuning in. Do buy a ticket if you can. Do like and subscribe and all that jazz. And have a wonderful weekend. It's really warm. I need a beer. And see you next time. Thanks a lot. Cheerio.
Thank you.